Speaking Human.
Today on Speaking Human, we predict the movies that will bank the most money at the box office this summer. Strap on your proton pack and fire up the USS Enterprise, because we're about to project your cinematic future. Whoa!
Speaking Human.
Welcome to Speaking Human, the official podcast of Monsters Unlimited, a creative agency with a business brain. I'm Shad Conley, Communications Director at Monsters Unlimited, and I also play the role of Magic in the upcoming movie Now You See Me 2. I had another one. I'm Shad Conley, Communications Director at Monsters Unlimited, and I can't wait for the upcoming sequel to this podcast, Speaking Human Civil War.
Well, I don't know if I can live up to that, but I'm Patrick Jebber, Creative Director at Monsters Unlimited, and I like me some movies. That's all. Just some movies.
That's all there is. Just movies. If this is your first time checking out the podcast, our goal on Speaking Human is to simplify complex marketing topics. We toss aside all the buzzwords and mumbo-jumbo to focus on how marketing can bring brands and people together. On today's episode, we're getting into the movie business. Using a highly scientific process we like to call guessing, we're going to share our picks for the 5 movies we think are going to roll in the most dough this summer. At any moment, this podcast could get reborn like Jason Bourne or paired with Kevin Hart in an action comedy. So let's get into it.
We found something out here.
Oh my God.
Why are they screaming?
They're not screaming. They're celebrating.
Dad!
She has arrived. Shouldn't we be nervous? Yeah.
What you just heard was an audio clip from the upcoming movie Independence Day Resurgence, which will deliver America the dramatic return of the Bill Pullman we've all been waiting for. Will that movie crack either of our top 5 lists? You'll find out in a minute. But first, let's jump back in time to the summer of 2015, just a year ago. Last year's summer box office numbers shattered records. With a total haul of almost $4.5 billion, summer 2015 saw a 10% increase over summer 2014. It was actually the second biggest summer of all time, beat out only by 2013's take of $4.7 billion. So what were the top 5 moneymakers last summer, you ask? Here's the list. Jurassic World, Avengers, Age of Ultron, Inside Out, Minions, and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Did you see any of those movies last year, Shad?
I didn't see any of them in the theater. I've seen a couple of them since, but I didn't actually go to the theater to see any of those. Did you? I know you did, actually. You went to see a good few of those, didn't you?
I think I saw 3. I didn't see Inside Out or Minions, but my kids did, so as a family, we saw all 5. We're contributing.
You were in the know with what was going on last summer. I was not. You know, looking back at that list is sort of a good precursor to what we're going to talk about today, because the number 1 movie on that list, Jurassic World, is one that probably a few people at this time last year would have predicted to be the number 1 movie. I know I wouldn't have had it on my top 5 list. And yet it went on to make huge money and become the 4th highest grossing movie of all time at the US box office, which is kind of crazy. So while you can make educated guesses on what movies are going to perform based on things like target audience, release date, existing marketing, online buzz, potential for repeat business, expected quality, and so on, there's still always an element of unpredictability involved, which is what makes this guessing game, as I called it, we're doing here today, fun. You know, it's both predictable and unpredictable what's going to happen at the box office. So one last thing before we get into our picks, we designated the summer movie season to be from the beginning of Memorial Day weekend to the end of Labor Day weekend. So the end of May to the beginning of September. So only movies released in that window qualify for our lists. So that leaves out, Captain America, Neighbors 2, Angry Birds, Sorry, guys, but you're out of the running here. So with that being said, Patrick, are you ready to jump into our picks?
I'm as ready as I will ever be.
Do you want to kick us off with your number 5?
I know this is pretty low on my list. My number 5, Shad, is Ghostbusters.
Ah.
So here's the deal with this movie. I love the originals. Sure, they don't have
the originals. You love 1 and 2?
I actually liked 2. I was young enough that I liked both. I did. If I go back, I liked 1 better than I liked 2 as an adult. Anyway, I know they don't have all the CG of today, but they still hold up mainly because they rely on the comedic timing of Bill Murray and the crew. The original, released in the summer of 1984, grossed $13 million opening weekend, which is nothing compared to today's standards. But Lifetime, it's grossed $242 million domestically. So it's got a great cult following, I would say, wouldn't you?
Oh, yeah. Ghostbusters, it was a huge movie in the 80s. It was one of the biggest movies that I remember from the 80s. So obviously it's a strong brand. Everybody knows Ghostbusters, right?
Yeah. And I think the original is what will help elevate this one. And the end product might not live up to its predecessor, but how many do really,
Yeah. It's got that, recognition that'll get people there. And I think people are curious about the all-female version of this, to see how that plays out. Kind of depends whether it's funny, whether people get a good laugh out of it, whether it gets a lot of word of mouth.
I'm actually hoping that those characters probably will have the same kind of chemistry that the originals did, and maybe we'll get some cameos in there.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's intriguing to me. I will say it didn't make my list. This is one of those ones that I think will probably do good business. I don't know if it'll crack the top 5 for me. I think it's going to be solid, but I don't predict it to be one of the biggest movies of the summer. I could be wrong. My number 5, a tiny little superhero movie called X-Men Apocalypse. This comes out pretty early in the summer, which is good. I think it comes out actually Memorial Day weekend. So it kind of kicks off the season. And the X-Men movies, have been coming out for about a decade now, and they all kind of perform similarly, which is around, 200 to 250 million at the box office. So they always do really well, and that's kind of their ceiling, though. There hasn't been one that's gone beyond that, at least at the U.S. box office yet. So maybe this one can, though. It's got my boy who I mentioned on our cool show in January, Oscar Isaac, is the bad guy in this one. So maybe he'll take it to the next level. But I think it's going to be a solid number 5 for me.
Yeah, that movie actually came up on my number 4. So I'll just couple it in. That worked out really well. I think this does look like a good X-Men. The restart of these using the younger versions that are iconic superhero counterparts have done pretty well in the box office so far, which is one of the reasons why I picked this to be on the list. The first 2 did 55 million and 91 million respectively in opening weekend. So I think that, it's just one of those things. They just keep getting bigger because you have that built-in audience, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you're right. The way they added in the young actors and Jennifer Lawrence and mix the old and the new. I feel like they've all been, other than maybe The Last Stand, they've all been pretty good movies.
Yeah. Especially they have so many of them now. There's always going to be a couple, 1 or 2 that stick out and go, that probably wasn't as good as it should have been. Yeah.
The one thing with these movies, like I mentioned, the ceiling is people like them. Nobody ever seems to love them. Like if you're like, what's your favorite superhero movie? Not many people go to X-Men.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know why that is.
Yeah. My number 4 is the return of Jason Bourne in the movie Jason Bourne. My reason I put this up here is people love these movies with Matt Damon. The last one that came out, The Bourne Ultimatum, which was back in 2007, made $227 million, which, pushed that ahead 9 years, and you'll probably see an uptick on that. I'm thinking around 250 million for this one. And I think people would just be excited to see Matt Damon kind of back in this role, and the same director who did the last 2. And they're pretty popular, and that character is pretty popular too. So I think having that in the summer, I think it'll make for a pretty big hit.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm going to hold off giving any of my opinions on that one because that one's a little bit later in my list, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
Sneak preview, huh? So what do you have at number 3 then, Patrick?
I have Independence Day, Resurgence. So this movie feels like someone needed to bring back a movie that has been done a million times since the original. Aliens invade the world and almost destroy humanity. Got it. I got it, Shad. they're going to almost destroy humanity. I got that part.
Oh, okay.
But I do think it is one of those, it's a really long time span between sequels. So I don't know how it'll turn out. Will the story be intriguing? I guess if it breaks the original box office record of 50 million the opening weekend, then it was worth it, maybe. What do you think?
This movie, I think, is going to be one of my predicted underperformers. I just think it's been too long since the last one. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure the excitement's there. It seems to me like one of these things, and there's many of these now, things we're bringing back. Mm-hmm. That do we really need to bring them back? I mean, was anybody calling for a sequel to this movie? Which I'm sure is just going to be a retread of the first movie.
Yeah.
Without Will Smith. Is anybody dying to see Bill Pullman and Jeff Goldblum fight aliens again? I don't know. I think this is kind of going to be one of those movies that they expect to be bigger than it is, but the, excitement for it, I just don't know that it'll necessarily be there.
Yeah, I agree with that. The thing is people go to the movies now for these cinematic adventures.
Yeah, especially in the summertime. You want that kind of experience and that visual experience. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Independence Day 2, because I feel like it could do big business, or it could be like more of the disappointing, I don't want to say flop, because it's going to make over 100 million, like probably no matter what. I just don't know that it's going to go that far over into the top 5. I don't even know if I'd have it probably be at the edge of my top 10 if I was making that, but that might be something I'm completely wrong on.
You could be.
My number 3 is a family film called The Secret Life of Pets. Have you heard of this movie, Patrick?
Yeah, I have.
This is from the people who made Minions and the Despicable Me movies, that same kind of studio. It's got like the voices of Louis C.K. and Kevin Hart, some other comedians. Summer's a good time for family films. They tend to do pretty well, obviously. Families are around, kids are out of school. They make a lot of money, at least when they're decent. And I think this will probably be the second best or second most popular family film of the summer, which, as you saw from the list you gave earlier, last year, Minions was the number 4 movie. And that's kind of where I think this movie is going to make that type of money. I think it's going to be the second most popular family movie of the summer. I expect it to perform similarly.
Yeah, I'm actually a little disappointed in myself for not thinking that through. You have a really well-rounded list so far, and having an animated movie on there should have been one of my predictions. So yeah, I agree with you. I think that may be on the top 5 list, even though it's not on mine.
I kind of approached it, especially looking at that last year's top 5 list. I'm like, it gives you some insight of the variety of movies that make money because they appeal to a little bit of different audiences.
You do need one of those in the summer, I think, to sort of tie it all together. My number 2 is Star Trek Beyond.
And why is that?
There's silence there, so I know that well, just like the rest of the franchises, I think this one is going to bank off the success of the ones that came before it. It's one of the main reasons why I picked a lot of the franchise movies. I mean, they're almost all franchises on my list because, built-in audience, right? But these movies have a lot of summer action and star power, and I think that's what people, like we were talking about before, go to see in the summer. These cinematic marvels. No comic book pun intended. Sorry, Captain America, we couldn't include you because I think he's going to be big. Comes out today. But I think that's one of the main reasons. Again, just kind of going back to you got the built-in audience from the previous ones. People like to see these big cinematic universes that they've created. So what do you think?
Yeah, and I think that movie will do well. There's a few questions there for me, though. One is it's not, the last 2 were J.J. Abrams. This is a different director.
That is true.
And I don't know how much that'll actually impact things. The second thing is I probably like the second movie better than the first one. The second, Star Trek reboot movie better than the first one. A lot of people, it doesn't seem like it's got a lot of love. Star Trek Into Darkness. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that's just my perception, but it seems like people kind of talk about it as something of a disappointment.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it has gotten a little bit of that. So
yeah, those are my 2 questions that make me think, because I considered that one as like the 5 spot kind of making the same amount as like an X-Men Apocalypse. And I think it'd probably be around 200 million. I don't know, unless it gets like stellar reviews and the buzz is just huge on that. I didn't think it would push into the top 5, but it's definitely got that potential.
Yeah, I think a lot of these, really comes back to if the stories are good, people will be like, you got to go see this because it was a better story than the previous ones because the action's all relatively the same, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. How good a movie is what pushes it to that next level. Because you have the marketing that can get people there opening weekend, but it's, how much that buzz stands up or how much people want to go see the movie again and again that, takes these movies to the next level. My number 2, another family film, Finding Dory, the sequel to Finding Nemo, another, 10 years later plus sequel, whatever it's been. I think this will do big business just because there's a lot of love for the first film, 1. And 2, Pixar movies in general do pretty big business. Last year on the list, number 3, Inside Out, Pixar movie. They tend to be well reviewed, beloved by families. So I think this is going to be the big family hit of the summer. It also has a pretty plum release date. It comes out June 17th. Which is a month after the nearest family film, which would be Angry Birds, that comes out in a couple weeks, and 3 weeks before The Secret Life of Pets. So it kind of has almost a month to itself to just rake in the family money. And I think it'll own that market over that period.
Yeah, that's a good prediction. You really have a science behind what you picked on your list today, didn't you? I'm almost jealous. I'm almost jealous that I didn't put more thought into my list.
So you feel like you're losing confidence in your numbers. Your fanboy list you don't think is going to hold up.
My fanboy list is not going to hold up next year's. I mean, when we review this, we're going to be like, Patrick, what were you thinking?
You never know. Maybe you'll be, have underdog success. But I like your admiration for my list. It makes me feel good.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great list so far. I have list envy, so it's the first time. So my number 1 is Jason Bourne. Ooh. Yeah, here's the cash cow, the one that I hope does well for my list. I know it's further down on yours. So here's what I had to just sort of tack on to what you had said, which were all good things. The originals were all great, and I think people will go see this one for the sheer fact that it brings back the original character, Matt Damon, who everyone loved as Jason Bourne. But here's the key to my science of my list, at least this one. The box office records for the original trilogy just kept getting better and better. Now, I know there's been a little bit of time in between these, but you had 27 million opening weekend for the first one, where nobody knew this character, right? And it was such a great story and, great action, fight scenes, those kinds of things. And then you lead into the second movie, which did 52 million opening weekend. And then the third one did 69 million because people, let's face it, were hooked with this character. You know what I mean? And even the offshoot with Hawkeye, the Avenger, did 38 million opening weekend. So
yeah, and that was unliked movie mostly.
It was a pretty decent movie, I thought, from that storyline that they took. So anyway, I think this one's going to be a winner.
Yeah, and that's, a reasonable pick. I mean, it's something that very well could happen. Just for the reasons you mentioned and the reasons I mentioned before, I just think it's beloved. I think there's going to be a lot of excitement about it. And generally, the movie's quality has been really high. That's a really good, the guy who directs those movies is a really good director. They put them together well. So I think there'll be a lot of positive reviews and positive buzz on that. Kind of the action movie of the summer. I think there's a good chance of that. So you may have that number 1, even though I think my number 1 is going to take it.
Just reading in between the lines, too, is I think Matt Damon is a great actor, right? And I think that he picks his movies really well. He had mentioned never coming back to this role. And the fact that he did come back tells me that maybe this is a really good story.
Yeah, and he's also coming off The Martian, which may be, I'm not sure on this, might be his most box office successful movie of all time.
Yeah, he didn't need to come back to a role that he had said that he didn't want to do again.
No, he just probably did it when they came to his house with bags of cash because they're like, people don't like The Replacement.
Please come back.
So yeah, it's a good pick. I think it's a good number 1. I think obviously I had it as number 4. It's definitely a movie we both think is going to perform. We'll just see how well. So my number 1, Patrick, do you have any idea what it is? Do you have a guess in your mind?
Point Break. No?
Yeah. Point Break, the re-release of the 1992 film, not the remake.
It would do really well, I think.
I think so too. Maybe they could update it so that these people are just, instead of surfers, they're extreme athletes with great knowledge of financial markets.
That would be a winner right there.
Can't miss.
I have no idea. What did you pick? Is it another
My number
animated
one.
movie?
It is not another animated movie. It is something that didn't even make it on your list. Suicide Squad.
Okay.
So it has an August release date, which is generally, your big money maker of the summer will play for more of the summer. That's kind of late. But I think this is going to be the movie with the biggest opening weekend of the summer. I think there's just a lot of buzz behind it. The marketing's been pretty good. It should kind of kill it with the preteen crowd that go to see movies over and over and over again. So this is kind of my prediction for the one movie of the summer to cross like the $400 million mark. You have a couple superhero movies earlier in the summer, but after X-Men, it's kind of barren until Suicide Squad hits in early August, and I think that's going to end up being the movie of the summer. It's going to be this year's Jurassic World. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, I don't disagree with you that I think it's going to be successful, but I do think that you're wrong. And here's why.
Okay.
Because I think that DC had a little bit of a flub with the Batman Superman movie.
A little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it got a lot of negative reviews. And not that this movie has gotten any negative reviews, but that flub that they had with the Batman versus Superman and some of the negative reviews are going to affect this movie. They shouldn't, but I think they will.
Yeah, I mean, that's a valid point. I think you're dead on there. I think there's a good chance this is a poorly reviewed movie. It's got that hanging over its head. But even that, you look at Batman versus Superman, still did pretty good numbers, made over $300 million so far. Kind of faded, though, pretty quickly after a big opening. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Those are the risky things involved. I think there's so much curiosity about this movie, though, because unlike your Batman and Superman, these are unknown characters that other than, you have the Joker in there and stuff, and they've just done some intriguing things with the marketing. I think it's going to come along at a time where there's not necessarily a movie like this around that people have flocked to it. It's going to be like a Dark Knight style, heavy but fun, action-packed. I don't know. I just think it's delivering something at a certain time of the summer that people are going to be looking for, and it hits that broad-based audience where you're getting like your preteens, your teens, your adults, so it's got a wide base. It is a risky pick because of what you said. There is a lot of cloudy question marks hanging over and especially the quality of the movie. Like Marvel movie, you're generally getting a quality movie. Mm-hmm. But I think the curiosity is just too big, and it's positioned itself nicely to own the summer, I think.
I think it's a good pick, and we'll have to see, but I think I'm going to win on that one.
We'll find out. We will find out. Just to make this clear up front, we'll revisit these predictions when we do our annual summer movie marketing show in September, where we talk about which movies, looking back, had the best marketing campaigns. Find out which one of us gets bragging rights for the next year.
Pretty confident, sounds like, in your picks.
I'm not necessarily confident in the order of my picks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but I'm confident in my top 5 as a whole. Like, I think mine's a little more accurate than yours. I think my top 5 is going to make more money than your top 5.
I got to be honest. I agree with you because I do think yours is more well-rounded. I did pick a lot of movies. I picked a lot of the franchises. And again, those built-in audiences sometimes really drives the box office in a lot of ways. And I don't think this summer is I think it's going to be okay. I don't think it's going to be as big as it has been in the past.
I think I agree with you there.
Yeah, I don't think we'll have anything that lives up to the Jurassic World box office success that we saw last year. But
no, kind of looking at the lineup and going through the movies and seeing what's coming out, I think there'll be a lot of hits. I just think there'll be less big hits. Mm-hmm. Like Jurassic World was a huge hit. Age of Ultron was kind of a huge hit. I don't know that we'll see too many of those, but I think we'll see a decent number of movies hit like 200 million, which is, I hate to say, is not an amazing success, but it's just mild success in the summer now with what movies cost.
Yeah. I do think there are some interesting things this year. I do like the reimagining or just the plain grasping for straws in Hollywood, Sometimes those are just like, oh, God, why are they doing this? Other times it's like, that'll be interesting to see what happens.
That's one of the reasons, maybe my list looks better on paper than your list, but there's that unpredictability I talked about earlier. You kind of never know. I mean, Ghostbusters could end up being the biggest hit of the summer, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that could happen. You just never know how these movies are going to totally land and play.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that between our two lists, we're going to have a lot. And maybe when we write them up in our entries online, people will see those and then that'll affect the outcome. You never know.
True. We are influencers in the world of filmmaking.
Yeah. So how about a movie that didn't make it onto your list that you think that might possibly could turn out to be a big hit? Is there any down there?
Yeah, I have a couple. One of the movies I had the biggest question mark on is Spielberg's The BFG. This is a movie I saw that was coming out. I haven't heard a lot about it. I haven't seen a lot about it. I don't know what it's going to do. I don't know what the interest level is, but you can never really dismiss, Stevie in the summer. He's got a pretty good track record. I just don't know who this movie's going to play to or who's excited about it.
Yeah, I don't know anything about them. I've seen the teasers and stuff, but there's nothing there, so it's really hard. It's kind of like, remember that year that he had Super 8 come out?
Oh, yeah. They played that with the mystery angle, too.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it could turn out to be something that's a hidden gem.
Yeah, which Super 8's a movie I like a lot. And I think another one, then I think there's a potential for a breakout comedy. Not necessarily one that I think is going to be great, but I think one that will make a lot of money is Central Intelligence, The Rock and Kevin Hart. A lot of people, that has a broad audience appeal. I think a lot of people will go see that. A couple of the other ones are Bad Moms and Mike and Dave Need Wedding Dates. There's always one big comedy hit of the summer, so I think those movies have the possible potential of being that.
Yeah, I think Bad Moms could be a winner. The trailer does a great job of hitting on some topics that moms deal with, and I think they will band together and go see this for a good laugh. All moms everywhere.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a hangover for ladies.
Yeah, for moms, right? Mom. Yeah.
But it's for all of us.
Because we can all relate. Because we all
know a mom.
Yeah, we all have a mom, I hope.
So that's a good pick. Is that your pick then?
Yeah, that'd be the one I'd put on there. Now You See Me Too could maybe be something that's out there. I don't know if that's going to make it anywhere near the 5.
Oh, I play Magic in that movie.
Yeah, you do play Magic, so it could be a winner right there just because.
It kind of follows my rule, though, that Hollywood doesn't follow, which is if you have a movie no one thinks is going to be good that turns out to be all right and make some money, that's not a movie people want to see a sequel to. Nobody wants to see the whole 10 yards.
And they didn't. Nobody saw that movie, actually.
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, like I said, sometimes they're grasping for straws, man. They're just like, we got to put something in that list for the summer or for whatever. So let's just get another sequel out there.
And it's got to be something people know or have heard of in some way.
Yeah. A sequel or a prequel.
Yeah. So one final question before we wrap up here today, and this is a pretty good one. I think this is pretty interesting. What would you say is your favorite summer movie of all time? What movie is kind of your personal definitive summer movie?
Shad, I don't think there's really any surprise here. Is there? I would say that my favorite all-time summer movie would be Point Break. I actually remember being in the theater. There's no question it's Point Break.
Oh, okay. So you saw that in the theater.
Yeah, I did.
Probably had to be 91 somewhere.
Yeah, it was 91. I believe it was June or July. So, yeah, that's my pick.
I get it. It's surprising. I mean, also one of my favorite movies, obviously. This is something we've talked about many a times before. It's a great movie. I don't even necessarily in my mind, because I never saw it in the theater. I just fell in love with The Break on video. I don't necessarily associate it as a summer movie. But, now that you mention it, it makes sense that it is. When I was thinking about this question, I was thinking, what do I remember that owned the summer? There were a few different things that came to mind. I thought of Spider-Man, the first one with Tobey Maguire when that came out. Batman in 1989, I remember was just everywhere that summer. It was it just owned that summer, it ate it alive. Smaller ones that popped in my mind were Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, and There's Something About Mary, I remember, was a comedy that was really big when it came out in the summertime. But the one that takes the crown for me, and I think it has a lot to do with age, how old I was when it happened, was Jurassic Park in 1993. Seeing this movie right when it opened, the marketing blitz just being huge, it was every fast food cup had a Jurassic Park symbol on it. And we just get bored, be let's go see Jurassic Park again. I feel I saw it 3 times. It was just big. It was a big event. It was Spielberg. And that's my definitive summer movie. That's the one that pops out in my mind the most anyway.
Those are all good ones, and I do remember those movies. Now that you mention them, Batman's definitely one of those. I remember it being like one of the first big superhero movies, I think, real live action.
Sure you get 5 different people on here, they'd mention movies and you'd be like, oh, yeah, I remember that. That was like a thing. There's a whole bunch of them, I'm sure every summer there's 1 or 2 that if people mention, you'd be like, oh, yeah, that was a thing. Especially when you're young. Just kind of stick out in your memory and, they just become part of that time period in your life.
Yeah, nostalgia. All right, everyone. Well, that's it for today's episode. You can find current and past episodes of the podcast at speakinghuman.com. You can also listen and subscribe to Speaking Human on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud.
So many places. Email us with your thoughts on our summer 2016 box office predictions. Tell us why you think they're amazing or, in Patrick's case, terrible. Or any questions or comment. feedback@thinkmonsters.com. That's feedback@thinkmonsters.com. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Speaking Human. Catch you then, humans.
Speaking Human.
Is that music?
It's a good choice.
Hey, well played.
We got no ship. No crew. How are we gonna get out of this one?
We will find hope in the impossible.
Well, at least I won't die alone. Well, that's just typical. Let's hope this doesn't get messy.
This is where it begins, Captain. This is where the frontier pushes back.
What the hell is this?
I know why you're here. Why we are all here.
Okay, let's never do that again.